All right, welcome in. It's the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer. We're going to call it the podcast again because we may get it up on iTunes. We are getting it up on YouTube. We're sort of relaunching things for the playoffs, and I'm pumped to do it. Will Pyle, my producer, has been a driving force behind this. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you guys a thought on each of the playoff games, what I think is important in each of the playoff games. I think this is as good a wild card slate as we've had in some time. I think there are a number of teams in there. There are a number of teams in there where you could see, I think the two teams playing Sunday afternoon, the Eagles and the Bears. I like the Ravens and the Chargers. I just think that there's a number of teams that have that outside chance of making it all the way to Atlanta. Doesn't happen very often anymore that teams come out of the wild card weekend and find a way to get to the Super Bowl, but I certainly think that that's on the table here. So I can take you through those four games, then I'll get to your questions. The first game of the weekend, Houston at Indy. I think the key in this game is going to be the weaknesses of the Texans. And I think the guys in that building would acknowledge this if they were being honest. There are a couple of very defined problems that they have on the roster that I think that they will address when they get to the offseason, but there are problems that they've been able to manage over the course of 2018. One is along the offensive line. The other one is at corner. I think they'll be able to manage the offensive line issue because I don't think that the Colts pass rush has the juice to really take advantage of it. The corner issue to me is the bigger one because they're going to be going up against Andrew Luck. The Colts have the offensive line to at least slow down the Texans pass rush, which is part of how they mitigate that problem on the back end. And Houston's going to have to find a way to deal with T.Y. Hilton. And so to me, the key in this game is Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton and the Indianapolis passing game being able to take advantage of one of the two weaknesses on that Texans roster. Second game of the weekend, the Seahawks and the Cowboys. Don't know how you can't love this one. The Seahawks have been a brand name team for a long time. They're sort of rebranded, relaunched, with all those guys gone this year. And you guys know the names: Averill, Bennett, Chancellor, Thomas, Sherman. They've found a way back to the playoffs. They found a way to 10 wins, and they're now going to go into Dallas on Saturday night. And this is one you don't overcomplicate. I think a lot is on Dak Prescott in this game. A lot is on the Seattle secondary in this game. If the Seattle secondary performs against a Dallas receiver group that's been very up and down, and Amari Cooper has sort of slowed down after his fast start, if Seattle can play the Cowboys receivers straight up, that means they can load the box. They can drop the strong safety Bradley McDougald down there, and that's going to make it more difficult for Dallas to get Zeke Elliott going. And so to me, a huge piece of this game is Dak Prescott against the Seattle secondary. Can Dak Prescott make plays against that Seattle secondary? Third game of the weekend, I love this one. I think, again, the two Sunday games are particularly good. And trust me, I normally, there's a snoozer or two wild card weekend. I just don't feel like, I look at the schedule, I don't think there's one this year. Ravens and the Chargers. And the Ravens, even though that game wound up being relatively close in the end 2 weeks ago, that was not a close game. The Ravens punched them in the mouth. And what's so interesting about this one is going to be Lamar Jackson and that Ravens running game. They run the ball 65% of the time. This is the first time that they're going to have to play a team the second time since sort of reconfiguring their offense around Lamar. So now you're playing a team that's seen you once and against a defensive coordinator and Gus Bradley who's seen you once. Are they going to be able to run the ball at the same time? Is there enough left in the bag in that running game where you're still going to be able to hit them in different ways? And finally, the fourth game of the weekend, the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles go right into Soldier Field, and to me the story here is strength on strength. You've got the Eagles offensive line, the Bears defensive front. Both sides have invested in those groups. The Eagles have 4 players on their offensive line who they've paid at a very high level in Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, and Jason Peters. And then the Bears, they invested top 10 pick in Leonard Floyd. They paid Akeem Hicks. They paid and traded for Khalil Mack. That's where I think a lot of the game is going to be determined. Okay, real quick to wrap things up, I'm going to give you guys one thought on each of these openings, what I think each of these what I think each of these teams needs. The Cleveland Browns, number one, I think they need a teacher. I think they need a guy who can work with young players. They've got more under 25 talent than almost anyone in the league. They did a really nice job in the draft last year. I love the makeup of their roster. They need somebody who can come in and teach and develop young talent. That's why I really like Matt Campbell in that spot. One of the reasons why. Number two, the Green Bay Packers. They need someone who can coach Aaron Rodgers. That sounds stupid. It's not dumb. All right. It's very difficult to coach a guy like that. You have to find ways to challenge a guy like that. You have to find a way to give that guy new information. How hard is that? Well, that's why Josh McDaniels, I think, makes some sense there, because Josh McDaniels is one of the few people on the planet you're not projecting into that. Like, he's done it before. He's worked with Tom Brady. So he's dealt with the anxiety of having to present new information to an all-time great quarterback, present challenges for a guy who has heard and seen everything. And so I think the number one thing for the Packers is finding somebody who can connect with Aaron Rodgers, and that's naturally going to be a pretty experienced quarterbacks guy, so it's going to be a good guy to have, too, over the next 4 or 5 years when you're going to have to find his replacement. Number three, Tampa. Again, I think part of the thing in Tampa is going to be culture. And so Tampa, I think they're looking at big names. I think part of that is ownership wanting to create some sizzle. They need a program leader. And so I think, again, a guy like a Brian Kelly, I can understand why that makes sense. A guy like a Mike McCarthy who has 13 years of head coaching experience, that makes sense too. Like, you need somebody with experience coming in there, and I think you need somebody who can build a program, because I think that's part of what's lacking there. Number four, the New York Jets. I think finding a guy who is a good evaluator of talent is important here. They've got a lot of resources. They've got a young quarterback, so somebody who can evaluate your young quarterback, but somebody who can evaluate the roster, who can decide who comes and who goes, and then help you spend some of that money that you've got this year, help you decide who to take with the third overall pick. I think an evaluator is an important thing there. Denver, number five. I think somebody who can unify a building is important. They've had so many issues there. And so that's why I can understand why, again, Mike Munchak comes into play there, because he's got head coaching experience. Number six, the Miami Dolphins. And I'm not ranking these. I'm just going down one by one. The Miami Dolphins, to me, they need somebody who can go in there and help them cast a wider net from a talent acquisition perspective. I brought this up with Tomlin in the past. I think that one of the things that Tomlin's able to do, he's able to manage big personalities. And part of the reason why the Dolphins are where they are right now is because Adam Gase had a specific personality he was looking for in his players. And so I think they got to find a way to widen that net a little bit. So finding a guy who can manage big personalities, I think it would be important. That's why, like Brian Flores, I sort of like the fit there. The Cincinnati Bengals, I think you need to find somebody who's resourceful, because that's a mom-and-pop operation in a good way. It's a mom-and-pop operation in a bad way, too. It's a mom-and-pop operation in that you're going to see a lot of loyalty there, and you're going to be given rope, and there's going to be patience, and all that's great. It's a mom-and-pop operation also in that the scouting staff is very small. There are challenges there, like not having an indoor facility that you're going to have to deal with. So finding somebody who's resourceful and can work around those things, very, very important. Finally, the Arizona Cardinals. I think the Arizona Cardinals, again, I think they need a personality. I think they need somebody like a Bruce Arians coming back in there, because there are so many of those guys in that building that had that for so long, and I think Wilkes sort of lacked that, like that dynamic personality. And so bringing in somebody who's a dynamic personality, which is part of the reason why I think somebody like, it'd be interesting to see like a Zach Taylor there who's 35 years old, who's like, I think bring a little bit more energy. So I think they need a personality in Arizona. I appreciate you guys coming out. I want your feedback. So give me your feedback on Twitter at Albert Breer, on Facebook at Albert R. Breer, on Instagram at Albert_Breer. This is the podcast, YouTube, whatever we're going to call it. It's here. It's going to be here for the playoffs. I'm working with Will Pyle on it. Again, all your feedback's appreciated. We want to make the most of this, so maybe we can do a little bit more of this in the offseason, leading into Combine, leading into free agency, leading into the draft. Love connecting with you guys here. So, again, please, please, please give me all your feedback. I appreciate you guys coming out. We will see you next time.